And welcome to episode 56 of the Brewed Sages, Stormbound players with a head for the game. I am Freeloader, and with me, as occasionally of late, are Sabaiku and Thomas. Sabaiku, how's it going tonight?
Fantastic.
And Thomas, how are you doing?
Pretty all right.
We are the Brewed Sages, easily the second best Stormbound related podcast in production. And as a reminder, you can always follow us at Brewed Sages on Twitter. Or for all of you who had gotten away with it too, if it wasn't for those pesky kids, our email address is thebrewedsages@gmail.com. Guys, we have been promising for a while that we would talk about some of the new cards, state of the games. We have been away a lot. I know a lot of our listeners have noticed. Sabaiku had a cold. Thomas had a cold. We're finally all here together. So here's what I'm going to tell you about our community news. SWCC is awesome. It's really cool. You guys should do it. It's just fantastic. Have fun. Go get some free stuff. You should play Toad games. If you're not playing Toad games, you have to ask yourself why you're not playing Toad games, because you should be playing Toad games. All right, community news is out of the way. Here's what we're going to give you tonight. This recording tonight is 3 guys who love Stormbound, love playing the game, sitting down and talking about it. That's it. There's no plan notes. There's no show notes. You can just throw it all out. If you dropped us an email and said something about whatever, we don't know it. All we're going to talk about tonight is just how we feel about the game, what we're enjoying, what we feel is strong, what we feel is good, what we feel is bad, what we feel needs to change. That's what we're giving you. Off the cuff, no plans, no nothing. So I'm just going to open it up. We'll start with Thomas. You did fairly well last season. And apparently you did it all in one night. What the heck happened? Walk us through that.
Honestly, I don't remember. That was already like 3 weeks ago. Life has been kind of crazy, and so yeah, I think Gray hadn't been even out yet, and so I was pretty sure I was just using one of those crazy Shadowfen decks with a crazy overpowered dragon in the deck. Thank goodness she's been nerfed, but yeah, I just did it all in one night, and then after that, I went on vacation, and I somehow stuck near the top 20-ish. So that means that clearly everyone else just needs to start actually getting into top 10, because there's people like me that once you get there, you have other things going on in real life and you have the opportunity to get to top 10.
I believe we refer to that as camping. So you camped. You raced all the way up there in one night, and then because of actual life events, you camped the rest of it and managed to coast your way still into a top 20 finish with that.
Yeah, and it should have been top 10 if I wouldn't have gotten Gray level all the way up to level 5 and lost a few games to get knocked out of top 10. But yeah, I legitimately didn't have service. You guys, you need to work harder. Jeez.
Okay, and Sabaiku, you finished fairly high last season as well.
I did finish in the top 10, and actually, my story is pretty similar. I got high early on, playing mostly Ironclad Rush, and lost a few games with it. So I switched to Shadowfen and then just kind of played Shadowfen the rest of the month. But I did not play a lot of games in the last week or week and a half of the season. I just got too busy with work and other things going on, uh, and I didn't really lose any ranking because of it. I think I lost one rank just because the only people that were playing more were the people that were already ahead of me that were fighting for number one.
Interestingly, so I didn't make the Heroes League, I think, until the last week. You know, I don't play that much, and most of the play I do is in draft. It's just this home improvement project for the listeners out there who don't know. We've completely gutted our house. We're missing 4 rooms right now. There's just plywood in the way, so you can't get to them anymore. So our home is about 2/3 of the size that it was when we first moved in. It's getting bigger, but there's a lot of projects going on. I just finished our deck. There's just a lot of stuff going on. So I don't have the time to play Stormbound that I wish I did. Because of wanting to improve my library, and because I just really enjoy the mode, I am prioritizing playing draft during Mondays through Wednesdays. And then by the end of the season, I'm trying to get my Heroes League reward, just so that it's a really generous reward. I want it, right? I will tell you that I made it in the last week, and I dropped probably I never played a game once I made Heroes League. I just made Heroes League and said, okay, that's good enough. I probably dropped almost 100 ranks. I got in at like 607, and I think I was 700 or thereabout at the end of the season. So that
Well,
means a lot of new entrants came in after me into the Heroes League. And either they also didn't play or they continued to grind upward.
yeah, and look, what Thomas and I were talking about, this is very clearly not a problem for most players in the game.
No, but it's
But at the
interesting.
top of the Heroes League, it definitely does feel like people get up there and then either go 50-50 and can't climb any further, or just stop playing. And I don't know what the right answer is. It is hard to win games up there, but my instinct is to say that if you can get that high, you can probably keep climbing.
One of the card players who I most have idolized in my career is Brian Kibler. He is a Magic the Gathering Hall of Fame inductee. He is one of the best just card players of any card game out there. And when talking about Hearthstone, which has been the main game he's been playing over the last decade or so, he has talked a lot about ladder fatigue and also ladder anxiety. And it impacts him. I mean, this is someone who's won millions of dollars, right? Playing Magic the Gathering tournaments. How is he afraid of queuing up another game? But he says it happens to him too. He hits a high mark. He gets, into the top 10 or top 5 by accident because he's usually memeing. And then he just doesn't he feels the anxiety of queuing into the next game because what if he loses? And so if it impacts someone as strong a player as him, I don't feel so bad about it impacting me. Do you guys feel that?
I absolutely do. I don't know why, because uh, half my month this last month was playing Ironclad Aaron deck. That's literally all it was.
Okay.
Like, it was super super fun, and that is actually how I got into top 20 in the first place. Or like ran all the way through all of Diamond and into Heroes League. And the moment I got into Heroes League, it's like, okay, I actually have to start being competitive now. And just like with what you were talking about, I have no idea why. Like, my brain just suddenly switched over to that. It's something that I need to try harder to tell myself I am playing this game purely for enjoyment. So who cares what the score ends up? But there's just some innate competitiveness that tells me that I need to start suddenly try harding.
Yeah, you see those numbers next to your name, and you want them to go bigger.
Hmm.
Or it's smaller, but yeah, I get your point.
Oh yeah, true.
I have no difficulty making the rank next to my name get larger. I could do that easy.
I was talking about the crowns next to your
Oh, the
name.
crowns. Right. But I do think it's interesting. In it's been something that I have felt not only in this game, but in every game I've played that has some sort of
Hmm.
ranking to it. Like even Call of Duty. Back when I used to really jam a lot of Call of Duty, I felt like the higher up I got, the more scared I was of queuing into the next round because I'm just like, man, now I'm going to be playing against the real pros, right? Like it just it weighs on you in a way.
Now,
Um,
what's different about this game, though, is
mhm,
the fatigue part of it. Especially with queue times at the top being very long,
that's
right?
fair.
Like the queue times are long. It takes me, 5-10 minutes to find a match. Makes me want to stop looking for matches, which then makes the queue times long for anyone else who happens to be trying to start up a game. It's uh, uh, definitely a downward spiral there.
Right. And then if you do lose a game, you're just like, oh my gosh. Like I now I have to win 2 games to make up for the one I just lost and still get ahead. Right. The next win I get just makes up for the loss. So if I want to get ahead, like I queued up today trying to jump from, let's say, rank 12 to 11. And instead I just fell to 13. I need a win to get back to 12. Then I need a win to get back up to 11, which was my goal. And am I really committing myself to another 40 minutes?
That is actually a really good point. I didn't think about it until right now, but I have found myself. So a lot of Magic players, that's originally what I came from. We
Mm-hmm.
call it tilting when a person just starts getting irritated or angry, and then they tend to make worse plays because they're not in the right, clear mind state. They're starting to get irritated, and so they tend to make more misplays, which causes them to get more irritated, and it's just that kind of that snowball effect. So we call it tilting, and I have found myself definitely. I don't tilt during games, but it's during the queue times when you're just watching the thing spin and spin and spin. Has been very, very irritating at times, and then I don't, or then I get into a game when I finally queue up and I'm in a bad state of mind, and then it's just kind of downhill from there.
I'm glad you said that because I do tilt as well on occasion. Although Sabaiku will tell you I tilt all the time. Like I'm just always tilted. I'm just a
You,
tilted person.
you tilt on many occasions, but typically you're fine on your turn. It's just you get upset when your opponent plays cards also.
Right. Like why are they play? Where did they get that card from? Well, like I'll give you a perfect example of the kind of thing that tilts me, right? And then this is going to bring us right into a quote from Zillet, right? Because um, say what you like about him as a person or whatever. I know that there's been a lot of controversy with Zillet over the last year, maybe year and a half. I lost touch with a lot of Hearthstone stuff, but I used to watch him very regularly as a streamer, and I really respected his ability to play Hearthstone. Um, so I was playing a game in draft and I locked my opponent's base, right, with 2 1 health units and then 2 Cordia. Yes, she was nerfed, but I still took her anyway because Shadowfen's that good in draft. And I'm just like, okay, I've won the game because my opponent cannot attack anything on his own baseline. He can't clear any of the units or the 2 eggs. My opponent plays Rogue Sheep and gets, of all things from my hand, my Butchers. So, what are the odds that my opponent has Rogue Sheep? Okay, very low. You shouldn't take Rogue Sheep in draft. And then what are the odds? It's 1 in 4 that he gets the one card that can help remove the 2 1 healths off my baseline. And I got really irritated. Like I almost threw my phone because I'm just like, man, you're just gonna high roll the crap out of it. But then I realized he didn't have any more mana. So yeah, he removed the 2 1 healths, but the 2 eggs hatched and then went into face. And that meant I had Butchers in hand. I had lethal. So this brings you into this quote from Zillet. He said, and I'm paraphrasing because it was a couple of years ago. In a game with chance in it, like Stormbound, something's going to go wrong for you. Something you are going to low roll. You are going to have the bad luck at some point. And what you don't realize is because you're always focused on what happens to you, the same is true of your opponent. You're going to have a dead draw when you really need XYZ card, and odds are you should have it by now, but you don't. Your opponent runs into something similar. It's not about who has the worst luck. It's about who deals with the luck better. So yes, my opponent high rolled the heck out of that turn, but I still won the game. Like there's no reason to get upset over that. I won. It's okay. It's just stay calm, let him play the incredible high roll that he got, and then win the game. But I think there's a lot of RNG games can really push you into these sort of like, holy smokes, that was such a low probability event that just happened to me. I feel terrible.
Yep, and those ones also outpace the super high rolls that you get too, because you kind of brush them off, and it was just okay, that was a win. Time to get into the next one. It's
Right. You don't sit and reflect.
Right. When my Sparkly Kitties took a 50-50 that gave the game to my opponent, I got annoyed. When it sealed the game for me, it's like,
it
oh
was just
yeah,
another turn.
yeah, it was just I made a good play, and yeah, I had to rely on luck there, but it was my only way out.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and it's just the way it was. But since you're not like happy about it, like you don't like nobody is sitting there and thinking about that RNG turn and it's like, oh my gosh, that was awesome. I am going to brag about that. Except for those few times where Ubis just hits your opponent for 15 damage with the other 10 units on the board. You do have to brag about that one. But other than that, it's just yeah, I got lucky.
Right. Exactly. You I mean, there was a lot of skill that led up to even having the opportunity to get lucky in that turn.
Well, and that's what I like to say, right? You have to put yourself in a position where getting lucky actually matters and has an impact on the game.
And I want to expound on that, Sabaku, because I don't know if you remember, but like a year, maybe year and a half ago, I tried playing a Stormbound deck with no RNG in it. And I kept running into problems where my opponents were playing RNG cards like Tiger or Ubis or whatever, and were getting lucky and beating me. And I'm like, this sucks because I'm trying to win with just skill. And you corrected me and said, no, you are trying to win it without any possibility of a high roll. And your opponents are also playing with skill, but they're choosing to play with cards that give them the opportunity for a high roll. So unless your opponents continually low roll, you will be behind the 8 ball. And that's a really important thing to remember. Like the RNG is not bad. It's what makes the game fun and frustrating at times, sure.
Yeah, definitely both.
There is something else I think to keep in consideration with this game. Um, so, us in this podcast, and honestly, probably most of the listeners to this podcast, have their collections at least nearly maxed out, if not essentially maxed out. Back when you were in bronze, silver, gold, it felt like you were losing every game you played. Every single game that you're queuing up, it's like, how am I going to get slaughtered this game?
Yep. Yep. The games that
Yep.
you did win, you felt like you scraped by because you were
Hmm.
facing opponents that had higher levels
Yep.
or whatever. And
100%.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly. The thing is that you had exactly a 50% win rate. Otherwise, you would not have been at the star rating that you were at. You would have dropped down and you would eventually start winning because you would be higher leveled, higher skilled, whatever than your opponents that you're playing. So, whatever star ranking you had when you were in any of those middle leagues, you had exactly a 50% win rate. That's where you leveled out at, and it doesn't feel like that, because I think honestly it's because the games are the people that play this game are extremely competitive, and 50% is a terrible percentage.
possibly. There's definitely a bias where you do tend to remember your losses more than you remember your successes, and
Hmm.
Yes, yes.
that's a big part of it too. The losses, especially when you feel like it was unearned, you feel like it was a bad beat. They stick out to you, and they stick in your craw much more so than, like you said before, just ho hum, another win, got my coins, time to queue up the next match.
Hmm.
Right, yeah, like in draft mode, for example. I will go out on I will die on this hill. Marked as Prey is not a great card in draft. It isn't. A lot of people seem to think it is, but it's not that good of a card in draft. It really isn't. But anytime I open with Heliotroopers and my opponent drops a level 5 Marked as Prey against me, I'm saying, okay, congrats. You just won this game because you've made bad decisions for the last 5 rounds of draft. And you won. This was the game. This is why you did it. You did it for this exact moment.
That's right.
You've had it. Enjoy it.
I'm queuing into freeloader. I gotta,
I gotta
doing
have
it later tonight. I gotta get my mark just pray up there.
get it to level 5. Like it's just like this is a bad card. Why did you use all of your upgrades on it? Um, but like yeah, like it happens, and then you queue into. And the funny thing about we've touched on this a couple of times. I remember having this conversation with Sabaiku, I think in the first couple of episodes. This game is so difficult to gauge your level of success because there's so many unknowns, right? So
Yeah,
I
I do talk about that all the time.
yeah, like if I draft a Shadowfen deck that has Marked as Prey, and I queue into 4 Shadowfen opponents in my run that all have Helio Troopers, I feel fantastic. Like that Marked as Prey was fantastic that run. I do it again next week, and I go, 2 and 3, and I don't understand what the difference was. That was, what was it, and I don't even. It doesn't even necessarily cue into my consciousness that it was because I didn't run into Shadowfen opponents that chose Heliotroopers. And without that easy target, Marked as Prey is really, really bad. And so there's just a lot of stuff like that in this game. I'm glad we got into this conversation. This was not like, again, none of this is planned. My hope was that we were going to get to talk about Gray and about some of the new cards coming out and just kind of where we are with the game. But I think this is kind of an important conversation to have. So let's wrap it up real quick. I'll let Sabaiku start with his final thoughts on just sort of how do you combat all of this not necessarily just tilting but ladder anxiety. Like, are you doing anything? You said yourself that you didn't really play a lot last week of of last season. Are you thinking that that's going to be the same this month, or do you have some different plans on how to kind of overcome that?
Well, last month I unfortunately just got stuck with a lot of real life stuff. Work was crazy, and I just didn't have the time to or the energy to do that, and also focus on Stormbound. I take my matches pretty seriously. Every match I do actually give my attention to. I don't tend to play while I have a TV on in the background or whatever. So that can definitely amplify the anxiety part of it. Um, for me, it didn't really end until I achieved the goal of finishing in the top 10 the first time. And then I was just like, I've spent all the last week playing the bare minimum number of games that I needed to just stay in the top 10. And it sucked. Like, I wanted to play games, but I wouldn't let myself just because I was worried about losing. And I didn't want to go through that again. Like, now that I've now that I've had another successful season, I can say it it's more fun to just play the game like that, and that's more fun to me than trying to finish at a high rank. Just enjoy the game, play a competitive deck, try to climb, sure, but uh definitely don't let a fear of losing rank stop you from playing.
All right. And Thomas, are you I know you're going on vacation again, so are you ever going to play Stormbound?
Well, I'm still trying to whenever I can. The way that I've been approaching it, honestly, ever since draft came out, and probably will be the same thing for the foreseeable future, is Monday through Wednesday is 100% dedicated to draft. And
Yes.
then Thursday and Friday is playing Brawl. And if I have the time to also to get to milestone 10 in Ultimate is also dedicated on Saturday and potentially Sunday, depending on how much extra time I have otherwise, because honestly, Brawl just takes way too many games to be able to get to milestone 10, especially with how many fusion stones are required to get a lot of these cards to level 5. I've been needing to play Ultimate Milestone 10 a ridiculous amount over the last month or two.
Wow.
But
Okay.
yeah, so that's like Monday through Wednesday draft, like I said, and then Thursday and Friday is been Brawl, and then generally that means that Saturday and Sunday are left for ranked, and even those 2 days are negotiable depending on if I can make it to level 10 in the Brawl. And
All right.
yeah,
I,
it's
I, I
it's
like
tight.
I like doing this as a theoretical a lot. Like I have often asked myself, like, what is this game without Bragda? Like if some intern at Sheepyard accidentally deletes Bragda, what does the game feel like? I will ask you this question then, Thomas. What does this game look like if Brawl just got deleted?
If Brawl got deleted,
Yeah.
oof. Well, number one, I would be just kind of having just rant after rant after rant on the Discord, as well as probably in this podcast too, because the fusion stones, as annoying as the 50 wins are to get to at the
Mm-hmm.
bare minimum for all the fusion stones, if there's no good income for fusion stones, there's no new way to level up cards, and that would be a huge hit on my long-term enjoyment on the game.
Mm. Okay. Sabaiku, what happens if I delete draft?
It gets boring. We've been through that. Brawl isn't for everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, Brawl requires resources to play. It's a nice way to turn your coins into other resources like fusion zones and rubies and cards. But if you don't have the coins in the first place, then you don't really get a lot of enjoyment out of it. On top of that, although there are 3 levels, not everybody can participate all around in the brawl. Personally, I usually do the warrior brawl and the ultimate brawl up
Can
to
we can we
like 70 crowns or
pause
so.
for a split second? Freeloader asked me about Brawl. He asked you about Draft.
Yes.
I'm getting there.
Okay, okay,
I'm
okay.
working on it.
I want to make sure.
I'm taking the long way. Right? No, I'm saying like so you have the brawl, but the brawl isn't for everybody because it costs resources to use, and you might not have the levels to make full enjoyment out of it. If you don't have the levels to play the ultimate brawl, then you're not getting any more fun and any more resources out of the brawl mode. So now you're just stuck playing ladder with longer queue times while other people are playing the brawl. Like having the draft on the opposite side of that really helps to offset that grind and make the game feel fresh and make the game feel fun.
Yeah, that makes sense. The other thing that is honestly like, so he never asked me about Draft, so I
It's true.
tried
I
to
did
stick
not.
to the answer to Brawl, but
Are you
on top
suggesting
of the
Sabeko cheated?
absolutely no, um,
I didn't cheat, I just won.
I'm gonna try and keep my comment super super short for Draft since he never asked me about it. As much as the many other reasons I absolutely love Draft, I also love being able to play against anyone, and so honestly, 90% of my games are against people that are in bronze, silver, and gold. And so it's awesome being able to have this massive pool of players to play against. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of really good people that are playing that are still in silver and gold.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
Oh, go
really
ahead.
good point. In Brawl, when you queue up against somebody at a higher rank than you, like you just know that their cards are leveled more than you and you're just guaranteed to lose.
Hmm.
Uh, in Draft, when you queue up against somebody at a higher rank, it doesn't matter.
It matters not at all.
In
Exactly.
fact, it
It's
feels
worse.
it feels really good, I suspect, to be in Draft as a gold player and beat a Heroes League player.
That's part of the reason why I stay in Diamond all month. Less embarrassing when I lose. In all seriousness, I agree. There's two things that I love about Draft. One is in terms of being able to open up the game to new players. I think Sheepyard has done nothing as important as Draft. Draft, the day you first install this game, you can play a game of Draft and you are on the same footing, unless, they have significant skill and understanding of how the cards work and you don't. But let's just say you've read through it and you understand all of it. You are on the same footing as everyone else. And I love that. I love that. It's a wonderful equalizer. The other thing that I love at the start of this year, I had 52 golden level 4 cards in my library. Last year, I was usually upgrading a card a month using 1,000 of the Heroes League reward, end of season rewards, right? That's where I got the 1,000 from. And that was it. So starting in January, I had 52. I currently have 0 golden bordered cards in my library, period. Period. Every single one of them has been upgraded. Every single new golden that has appeared has been upgraded. The economy has been one of the biggest concerns I've had about this game because as I've tried to introduce new players to it, it's been the one thing they get hung up on. I don't want to say it's completely fixed, but it sure feels like it's completely fixed to me. And I love that pardon me. I love that Draft has done that. Why don't we take this conversation now from where we're at, which is, I think, a pretty good place, and start talking about some of the new cards that are coming out. So one of the things that Sheepyard has been, I don't want to say accused. Accused is a hard word, but has been labeled as not being able to introduce cards that are impactful to the meta, right? And then Kitties got got dropped, and everyone was like, okay, well, yeah, Kitties is good. We've got a whole bunch of new stuff coming in. Zero, Gray. We've got a bunch of new epics coming in this month. I don't know, guys. With the new cards that Sheepyard's introducing as of late, do we feel like the pace is good? Do we feel like the number of them that are relevant is appropriate? Do we feel like we can keep up? I don't know. I will open with Thomas.
Awesome. I was gonna ask if I could start.
Yes.
So first thing I have to say is that the cards that Sheepyard had been releasing that had been meta relevant, I had been tracking it over time, and I want to say it was like 51% were relevant or 52%. It was just like right at the 50% mark. And that was exactly in line with everything that had been before Sheepyard took over. Like it was almost exactly 50% of the cards that had been released to the
Really?
game since I had started playing in mid 2018 had been relevant to the meta. And so I just wanted to go out on the record and say the amount that Sheepyard releases is relevant at basically the exact same rate. And so I just wanted to point that out because, yeah, that is relevant information. I mean, so like the amount of fusion stones that you save, you only need to actually save for the 50%. You don't have to save for everything. And yeah, obviously you want to save for more than 0%. So, yes, it has been about 50% over the course of time.
That's really curious. Do you think that's like a data point that Paladin might have shared with Sheepyard? Like this has been our policy or our philosophy, and Sheepyard just adopted it, or you think it's dumb luck?
I honestly think it's about dumb luck. I think you flip a coin and you hit 50%, and so that's going to be the same for your cards.
Right. I don't think they're setting out to make bad cards. I don't think they're saying, "Oh man, let's make half of these real stinkers."
Yeah,
It's yeah, sometimes you misjudge power levels, sometimes you misjudge what abilities are going to be relevant and what are not.
Okay, that's fair. So, Subaiku, there has been a lot of nerfs. Lately, Shadowfen has been getting kind of beat up. Cordia just got nerfed, and there's talk. Berjosa specifically in Discord has said that Rain is kind of on the block. Is Rain just getting in the way of design space? Like, can you? Is Rain just like brag that kind of shows you how it
Maybe.
abuses stuff?
Well, so the problem is I don't know if it's getting in the way of design space because I don't know what their plans are and I don't have any great ideas for how to synergize with it.
That's fair.
I think it's more getting in the way of design space in the sense that Rain and Bragda is such a powerful combination of cards that it crowds out any new ideas because you immediately look at that and say, sure, that's pretty good, but I'd rather just fill the board with 10 strength units.
Well, yeah, but even things like Gray comes out, and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, what happens if you play, two cards going first, and then your opponent plays Gray, and then what do you do?" And everyone's like, "Oh gosh, you're really up a creek." And then somebody says, "Well, you could just play a 2-drop in Rain." Oh yeah, like Rain gets in the way of everything, even the new cards that Sheepyard's dropping right now. You're like, "Wow, look at that Rain!" And not for
Sure.
nothing, there's a new neutral epic, right? The sisters.
Big Sisters of Growth, which do rely on having a board full of weaker units, and there's one really easy way to build a board full of weaker units, and everybody immediately was like, "Oh yeah, just make some toads and you'll be fine."
Right, exactly. Like that's the thing. Like your only other option is to play Doppelbox, cycle another card, and hope to drop back into Doppelbox. Like Rain is just so good again, and it does kind of impact a lot of these cards in a way that no other faction can. Right?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that no other faction is as good at filling the board as Shadowfen is, and it's really all because of this one card. You
yep.
know, Azure Hatcher does a little bit of that too, but Azure Hatcher costs more mana, it takes more time to develop because it's on an on death effect. Um, Azure Hatcher rewards smarter play generally, but
Okay.
you cannot get over the fact that Rain costs 2 mana less, and that makes it just so much better in every way.
But even Azure Hatcher is also Shadowfen. Like it sounds like Shadowfen is the only faction, and it's weird because we've got Doppelbox, we've got Dreadfons, we've got like all these cards in Swarm, and you think of Swarm as being like, well,
Well, like a
swarmy,
swarm.
right? And yet Shadowfen's the one that like clogs the board more. Thomas, you keep track of this. Which faction has the most number of number one finishes in the Heroes League since the start of the Heroes League?
Crap. I didn't. I've been so busy I never even put down this last month's, but I
But
unfortunately do want to say I think it's Ironclad has the one up now.
nope.
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 The
Nope.
Amazing Azo took it with a
Oh,
Shadowfen deck
Shadowfen
last
Shadow.
card.
month.
So yes,
Mm-hmm.
Shadowfen is in top place for the last year now.
Yep. And it is neck and neck with Ironclad, which is notable. Um, because
Well, to be fair, a lot of those ironclad wins were earlier on before nerfs to
scrapped.
Destructobots
So
and Scrapped and Linked.
yes. Well, so as much as you guys have been talking about Rain, the best comparison for Rain that it unfortunately has missed the chopping block for way too long because it had been nerfed once, and so people were like, okay, it's already been nerfed, it's too weak, or it's fine now, but it's still too strong. But Unstable Build, a 2 mana card that is extremely sticky and keeps your front line for way longer than it should.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree with that.
got nerfed, still good.
Hmm.
Still good.
Yep.
Oh,
Well, I mean,
so
look, Rain of Frogs got nerfed and it's still good, right? It's no longer 1 mana at level 5.
Because that was it. It was just absolutely busted. If it hadn't been nerfed before Heroes League, it would have absolutely that month been number one
And every month.
until it got nerfed.
so my uncle turned 18 a month after the legal drinking age in Connecticut was bumped to 21. And I kind of feel that way about a lot of things in Stormbound because Sabaiku and I got our reign to level 5 like 2 months after the nerf. We have no idea what it felt like to have that much power for 1 mana. What was it like? Did you play it at all, Thomas? Like
um, you guys are gonna hate me, but I've never really liked Shadowfen, so I didn't play it that much.
you were literally sitting on like the most powerful thing ever in the game, and you're like,
Well, no,
meh.
because Queen and Bucks was a
Queen and
thing.
Bucks back then. Oh my God, Queen could pull Bucks.
And
Yep.
yep, and then 6 mana Herald Him to top it off.
Oh, that was so gross.
I wasn't even playing that at the time. I was playing One Movement Booming Professors. That was the deck.
Oh, geez, I remember that. That was remember we actually had an episode called "Okay Boomers" discussing literally why hasn't this been nerfed if Chestnuts got nerfed. All right, so I promised people in the official Stormbound Discord that we were going to talk about Gray and about the new cards. And we have, I think, given everyone a decent sort of background on where we think the game is overall. Before we get into the new cards, I'm going to say I actually think I think the game keeps getting better. I really do. I think the game has not been in as good of a spot since we started playing as it is right now. I'll open that up to Sabaiku to see what he thinks.
Yeah, I mean, look, that does not mean that there's no more room for improvement.
Oh,
There
of course not.
certainly is, right? It's still quite the grind to get new cards leveled up. The new cards coming out. I know, Thomas, this is a particular gripe of yours. The new cards coming out are just, especially all very high rarity, which makes it very difficult. Um, and there's not really a need for that, but our way of getting resources never been better. We have the draft mode, we got better quests than we used to. We got more coins coming in per win than we used to, especially at the higher levels. So if you play well, you can develop your collection much faster. And that's something that was definitely lacking before. And
Painfully.
I just hope that they keep on going in that direction and give people more chances for more resources and let us actually enjoy and play with the new cards that are coming into the game.
Thomas?
So overall, happy with things except for yeah, the new cards coming in as Sabaiku had foreshadowed. The fact that there's so many high rarity cards is honestly pretty concerning to me. They've now released more epics since taking over in July of 2020 to today than they have common cards, and that I see a pretty big concern. This year alone, the cards that they've released into the game has been a grand total of 4,300 fusion stones to level every single one of those up to level 5, just
Ooh.
for the epics and the legendaries that have been released in. That's about an entire year's worth of saving up for fusion stones and all taken care of in one fell swoop of 4 or 5 months. So honestly, if things were to continue like this for the next 2 years, that would be beyond red flag for me. So I'm really hoping things calm down and we get a lot more or way more focused on the commons and the rares being added to the game as you would kind of normally expect, where a common is a common, or just from purely that conversational aspect, where, oh, it's a common card. And so we're much more likely to see a lot more commons being added to the game
Yeah,
than the.
there's definitely a problem when there are more rare cards in the game than common cards.
What if they got rid of the whole concept of a common card? What if they just said all common cards are now rares and we're compensating you for that kind of a thing? Like,
Honestly, that would make sense to me, even just from like a percentage of amount of cards in the game.
right. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. So
and
then your lowest rarity is the majority of the cards, and
mhm.
you only have 3 tiers instead of four.
Yeah, honestly, I'd be fine with that. So the two main reasons I am getting concerned about this, and I really want to talk about it. The first one is obviously just a massive amount of fusion stones to be able to get these cards for the ranked modes. But then secondarily, for the draft mode, when you have only one or two options for legendaries and two options for epics, and then is that 4 options for rares and 4 options for commons, like that doesn't, it's not a linear between the two of them. And so the it just needs to get balanced out, and we need to get more commons into the game based on that. And with the 7 epics that have been released into the game this year, the amount of fusion stones that have taken, you could have had what was it, like 21 commons introduced at the
Ooh.
same time for the same fusion stones equivalent cost. I would personally like to see that many more grand total of cards, that much more design space than a few concentrated ones.
Hmm.
All right, so I'm glad you said that because I want to jump into the idea of design space. One of the things that I have felt about the game is that the first couple of turns are fairly scripted, ignoring draw RNG, right? I'm going to open on 3 with green prototypes into my gifted recruits. You're going to respond with, I don't know, kitties into dubious hags, right? Like, I love cards that make you think about those opening turns. So I played a deck called Clown Fiesta because it was a Clown Fiesta. Thank you, Savitz, for that phrase. Um, and in it, I actually had level 5 Faithless Prophets, and I've opened with Faithless Prophets now. I don't know, a handful of times because of just I didn't I didn't get a better opener. So one of the things that I've found is if my opponent has overchargers, they for some reason think the best play is to play overchargers in front of the Faithless Prophets. And that's a terrible play. Um, a lot of times I respond by witchesing my own Faithless Prophets back to my side. Now I've got 2 giant units, or I play another unit and rain, and then at the start of their turn, the Faithless Prophets turn back to me, and the board's clogged. Like, it's just, it doesn't work out the way they think it does. But the interesting thing about it is by interrupting that script of the opener, the Faithless Prophets play has caused some really weird, not card interactions, but interactions between me and my opponent. My opponent doesn't know how to handle this situation, and so everybody involved is thinking, I'm trying to guess what they're going to do, they're trying to figure out what the heck to do with that. And in that, I've found some of the most enjoyable matches when I start playing cards that make my opponent have to rethink what was an automatic turn. In that light, I love the concept of Gray the Balancer. I don't know if it'll work, but at least the idea of going second and playing it is just, what do you do? Sabaiku, you've been playing some Gray at level 4 because you got him up to level 4 relatively quickly. What have you found so far playing with Gray?
Yeah, it's definitely a very powerful effect. It's definitely thinking about the game in a different way than before. And honestly, even after a few days, it still continues to trip me up where it's like, oh, I thought I had the right number of units, but I did not. Wasn't paying attention. Oh, I accidentally softened up this unit. So now it's the weakest one on the board, where in my mind it was, the previous turn a different unit was weaker. So I just kind of kept thinking, oh, it'll destroy that one. And now it no longer does. So weird interactions like that just get me thinking about the game a little bit differently and trying to decide when to use it, how long to hold on to it, trying to think about its function compared to everything else in my deck. Uh, it's a really great card. You can choose to just play it out on an open board and let your opponent kind of try to play around it or deal with it the best they can. If you have more units on the board, you can tuck it behind one of your units so it doesn't move when you play it, and then it doesn't trigger when you play it. And then if
Whoa.
they clear your units, it'll then trigger at the beginning of your turn. So there's a lot of fun things you can do with it. But with all of that fun, it's still a very niche use. It's not a definitely not a card you just play in any situation. Like trekking is a good removal card that you can just put on the board whenever you need to get it out of your hand. Gray is not that. It's definitely a card that you can't use flexibly, but when you do want to use it, man, is it fantastic. And every so often you get a case where it's like, oh, my opponent has played debug loggers to buff up the one unit left on their board. Now he's got like a 9 strength and 8 strength unit on the board, and I'm going to play Gray and just totally wipe out an 8 strength. And that's a lot of fun.
So one thing that I've been thinking of, my Gray is only level 3. Thank you, Draft Mode, for getting me all those copies because I did not pay for or craft a single version of it. One of the cards that I've really wanted to try playing with it actually is Stone Masons. Because I feel like Masons with it, like Masons is weak, right? It's only 2 health. And so there are moments where you play it and your opponent's like, oh, I don't want to kill that because it'll buff too many things. So they leave it as the weakest unit on the board and clear around it. And then with Gray, that's kind of interesting. I don't know.
That seems like a very specific situation that would be very difficult to engineer.
It's true, but Masons has been one of those cards like Faithless Prophets that have forced my opponent to think about how they want to play their turns, right? Like they see it there, it's, kitty corner protecting something in their corner. Do they want to clear the stonemasons? Because if they do, then the other unit gets really big and then they have to take more face damage. Is it better to just take the 5 from the gifted recruits and let the masons get to the baseline and then try to clear it next turn? Like it's not a straightforward card to play against, which is part of the reason why it's in my like pantheon of great cards. I don't know, Thomas, what do you think? Where is Gray right now? Do we think Gray definitely is a meta card, or is it still up in the air?
It's definitely a meta card. I have to first say before I get into that that I both love it and I hate it. The reason we're gonna talk about why I hate it first. 100% to Sabaiku's point, you really have to understand the board state and reanalyze every single turn before you play it, because what you were thinking on your turn and you pass it to your opponents when you go to get ready for work or make your dinner, when you come back to your turn and look at the board state again, you have to reanalyze the entire thing because, yeah, exactly what he was saying. Things change over the course of your opponent's turn, and I tend to play a lot of games when I am very distracted. So you have to completely reanalyze your turn, figure out what's going to get destroyed, if anything, and then continue playing it. I see it as a very balanced card. It is a meta card, and it is very strong in the correct decks, but it's garbage in other decks, which is great balancing for it. Better than something like Bragda, where in certain decks, Bragda is so unbelievably OP that you kind of just want to play only that deck. Gray works amazing in just control decks in general, but not as completely OP as something like Bragda is in its own um, deck style. So Gray is awesome. You'll generally get 2-for-1s for it unless you're already so far ahead that when you play Gray, it destroys itself. At that point, you're pretty happy with where the game is going, and that's the reason why it's an awesome card.
All right, no one is talking about Zero. Sabeki, what happened to Zero?
Well, Zero is 7 mana, and that's 3 more than Gray, which automatically makes it harder to use because it's just a lot less flexible. You need to really have the right board state for it. I know that people are experimenting with it, but I suspect the outcome will be that it will not be a meta card. Whereas at least Gray, I will expect to run into it on the ladder with regularity. Zero is a really neat idea. I'm not sure what kind of deck to fit him in. Honestly, like I've been kind of thinking it over, but not too much because I don't want to spend all my fusion stones on him. But it's in the same way that Gray requires you to pay attention to the board state and be continuously reanalyzing. Zero requires you to remember the board state as it was, and that's
Mm.
also really tough. Like you can very easily make a mistake about, oh, which tile was that unit in at the start of the previous at the start of this turn again, and if you have that down to a 50-50 and you guess wrong, you might just lose a game because of it.
Well, Temple of Time is like that too, right? And yet Temple of Time isn't seeing a ton of.
Oh,
Of
Temple of Time is nowhere near as complicated as Zero.
oh,
Um,
really?
Yeah, you got to think about all the different meta cards that are currently played, and if something gets confusion, you really truly have to be paying attention, or you're playing something like Lost Psyches. Like you really truly do have to remember exactly where they ended at, not even like where they started the turn. Like you could glance like when your opponent's turn is ending, but yeah, Lost Psyches bounces to another spot, and so you have to remember where that last spot was if it ends up dying.
Oh, good point. Good point. Good point.
Right?
Okay.
because
That's happened a few times.
because Zero requires you to actively play it, and Temple of Time, it's going to do what it's going to do at the start of your turn. You don't really, like, you have to pay attention when you're setting it up the previous turn,
Well,
but
and when
you
you
don't.
hit end turn,
Yeah,
when you hit end turn, whatever you remember when you start your turn, that's exactly all you have to remember.
exactly. It's going to do it automatically. It doesn't require you to sit there and say, okay, at the start of my turn, what happened? No, it does whatever it can do based on your setup.
Huh.
Yeah, in my opinion, they really need to create some kind of visual for Zero when you're hovering over something. I know that would be a lot of coding. But honestly, when board states get really complex and there's a lot of trades that happen at the beginning of a turn, and maybe you didn't even have Zero in your hand at the beginning of your turn, so you weren't even trying to memorize the board state, and then you cycle into it and you're like, oh crap, what was going on left hand side? What was going on the right hand side, front side, back side? Where am I going to get the best value for what I want to do this turn? It does get really complex really fast if you want to be able to make a great decision.
I think the answer here is screenshot. Every time your turn flashes up on the screen,
That
You
is an option.
no,
Yes.
that honestly, even that wouldn't be an option because since your units only move one at a time, you've got something that may be confused, moves left or moves right, and then you've got your Lost Psyches that bounces to an entirely different spot on the board because you have to remember where that spot that Lost Psyches teleported to and died, not where it started the
right?
turn.
And which spots were occupied by a unit, but now is occupied by an enemy. That.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking of confusion, I'm confused.
There was seriously a lot going on with this card. But besides that superficial thing of where things were at, I've thrown it into a couple of swarm decks now. I thought it would have the best home there. I've thrown it into like one or two winter decks, and I think one or two Shadowfen decks. And unfortunately, I think Heroes League is just currently too fast for it right now, that I just always end up cycling it away. Even like on the 7 mana turn, I can play three other cards, and so that's usually the choice to reset my opponent's front line, and so I have not found any decent home for it yet.
Yeah, I mean, look, the best use case for it is a scenario where you have units on your opponent's baseline that walk into their base at the start of the turn, and then you know exactly where the units were. You can position zero accordingly, you can bring them back. But if that's the case, you were winning that game anyway. It doesn't matter what you play on 7 mana. As long as you continue to play on your opponent's baseline, you're probably going to be fine.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Zero works the absolute best with Blessed with Brawn.
Oh my god.
Fun
Yes, it
decks.
does. But yeah, to Sabika's point, it does. Zero does, in my mind, feel kind of like a win more card, right? Like if my opponent is winning trades, then Zero can't resurrect anything because the cells where my units used to be are now taken. Uh, so it has to be like situations where I had units that survive trades and are still there, and then die at the start of my turn.
Yeah, it's
I'm already
actually
winning that game.
it's a lot of ways opposite of gray, right? Gray is good when you're behind. You
Okay.
play it,
Yep.
it balances the board out for you, and it's useless when you're ahead because it's just going to kill your own units. Like your best case scenario there is you try to get it to kill off your own green prototype somewhere irrelevant on the board.
Know my own stonemasons because I want the buff.
Zero is the opposite way. It's only good when you were ahead on the board, and it's useless when you're behind on the board, unless you really just need that 15 strength to take out something that your opponent's got that's kind of chunky. And there's cheaper ways to do that.
Yeah. All right. Let's go from there to one last question because this episode is actually I didn't even think this episode would be this long. But we actually have a lot to talk about in the game. Um,
1 hour
Cordia got
in, you say that.
yeah right. Uh, Cordia got nerfed. I played Cordia twice in draft this week, and let me tell you, Cordia's fine in draft.
Yep, still overpowered.
He's still good. Real good. I went 6-1 with her twice. So with that in mind, I haven't played her in constructed this season, and she may be toned down. But we mentioned this on our last episode, Sabaiku. The fact that she takes up 4 cells in a 20 cell board, 1/5 of the board is taken up when you play her. That has intrinsic value. Like she's not bad still, right?
Yeah, I have not played her in ranked mode since the balance changes. So I cannot speak from experience on this end, but at least playing against it, yeah, it's still a pain in the butt to deal with. Those eggs still take up the board, and you gotta find creative ways to get rid of them. Uh, but at least if an egg or two hatches and gets through, it's just a little bit easier to deal with now, and I think that's the main thing. I have not particularly struggled playing against Cordia yet this month, but the month is still early, and I'm not playing anywhere near top of the Heroes League right now, so it could definitely get worse as I start to see decks that are a little better.
All right. Well, let's think about it this way. At worst, Cordia's body itself is equivalent to what? 4 mana? 4.5 mana? So you could play Cordia thinking she's a 4.5 mana card with a 1.5 mana. I don't want to die this coming turn at her. So for 6 mana, you get a 4.5 mana card, and your opponent can't put runners into your base, right? Like that's the worst case scenario of what Cordia is. And I think most people would rather pay 1.5 mana than end the game if they're losing. Like it's just, I don't know. She's still decent.
Oh, the way I like to think a lot of cards is let's pretend that she at base you could play her for 4 mana and you get the 9 strength body. How often you're doing that versus I'm only 2 turns away from 6 mana, and if I can kick for the extra 2 mana, I get these 3 eggs that can hatch and give me an extra 18 strength. I'm gonna wait my 2 turns out, and I'm just gonna play my other cards in my hand to kick for this card for an extra 2 mana because that value is insane.
every time.
It's good value. It
Exactly.
is.
And that's where I'm saying that for 4 mana you get a 9 strength card, and that's already a great return. We don't even have a card in the game like that, and
Four
yet
mana, 9/1. 9/1. It has movement. Don't forget.
that's what I'm saying. Like that's great. I would play a vanilla 4 mana 9 strength card
Heroic
in a
Soldiers
lot of
needs the
decks.
buff.
Exactly. What I'm saying there is that, yeah, that's already an insane return. I would play that in most decks, and then we add on this little kicker that just makes the card still bonkers, and people would still be holding on to that card for that extra kicker because it's that strong.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. All right, so we're about an hour and 5 minutes into this. I want to wrap this up. This has been a wonderful conversation. I'm really thankful we got to do it. Thomas, I know you're going away on vacation again. And it's just been, gosh, it's been over a month since the three of us got to sit down together and talk about the game. And I just have to say that this has been wonderfully refreshing, and I've really enjoyed it. I will start with Subaiku. Where are you at? Do you feel like there's anything that really needs to be changed with the game right now? Like Sheepyard needs to focus on this in the next quarter of 2022, or do you feel like things are going well? Just keep on doing what you're doing, and yeah, maybe that rain nerf needs to happen.
Well, in terms of balance changes, I don't think there's anything that needs to happen.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think everything is pretty well balanced now, and even though the combos that we're talking about as super strong, like Rain and Bragda, are not necessarily they're distorting the kind of decks that you play in Shadowfen because it's an optimum strategy, but I don't think it necessarily is distorting the meta to an unhealthy degree. um, what I'd like to see in the next quarter, honestly, is Joe just talked about the long term roadmap that they have on Discord. He keeps teasing things like guilds and extended campaign modes. Like I'd really like to see them deliver on that kind of thing.
Ooh. Okay.
New ways to continue to interact with the game. The success of draft mode is definitely fantastic, and I'm really happy to see it. But we're getting to the point where it's been nearly half a year since draft mode was introduced, and it would be nice to see some fresh features.
Okay. Thomas.
Honestly, with how much work I have to assume draft took, I could, and how tight-lipped Sheepyard tends to be, I could see them. I mean, honestly, draft mode probably took an entire year worth of programming and coding and making sure that it worked smoothly. I wouldn't be surprised if they're working on one or two large things behind the scenes that they're not even talking about with us. So I think the general balance changes and the general release of new cards is good, except for obviously my concern of the rarities. So as long as something happens, I wouldn't even say this quarter. By year's end, something else large, I would still be content.
So I don't play as much as either of you, so it's difficult for me to catch up when Gray the Balancer shows up, right? Like I'm at level 3, and I'm at level 3 because I got super lucky with the last 2 weeks worth of draft mode runs. I don't even know. I think I got like 5 or 6 copies. It was insane how many copies of Gray I got. When a crucial card like that starts to show up, when it's a legendary, like the packs they offer in the shop only get me one copy plus some fusion stones. It's difficult to feel like I can keep up on that part of it, especially in a card that I'm so excited about. Like I want to play it. You know what I mean? I love the design of the card. I want to start jamming it into all my decks. But the most I can do, even with all the fusion stones I happen to have, is get it up to level 4. and that's probably good enough to start to experiment with. I don't know. Outside of that, I have to say that I think, gosh, draft mode is so good. Oh, apparently it's my bedtime. Draft mode is so good. Sheepyard really, like, out the chute. It's just well done, and I don't want to take anything away from Sheepyard because I think Sheepyard did a wonderful job developing it. Thomas is right. It's like a year's worth of work. But a lot of the here's the rules about what you can draft and what can be served to you in each round of the draft. A lot of that work was done by Reckless because his draft bound that he wrote in a script in Discord did a lot of that, and I think we all as a community owe a lot to him for having done that work up front and figured out what is balanced, how many legendaries should you get in a round of draft and stuff like that. He did yeoman's work. I think overall the game's just in a great spot. Like if I could give feedback to Sheepyard right now, it's just continue to experiment. Gray's a wonderful experiment. Ciro's a wonderful experiment in terms of like new functionality. Keep going, but please give us more commons. Can some of these things be common cards, not
Absolutely.
legendaries and epics, please?
Because yeah, sorry, maybe I didn't make that clear. Like when I was like talking about the amount of fusion stones that it would take to get to these 7 epics and 2 legendaries to level 5, they could have been releasing 2 commons every single week since January 1st, and it would still cost the same fusion stones as these 7 cards that they've released since the beginning of the year.
Yeah, it's just it's hard to keep up,
hmm
and more than that, it's just
Well,
I
and
don't know.
the thing that you don't want it, so like they have done an amazing job to increase the economy and increase the amount of rewards that people got last year. I did
Yes.
an entire graph about that because I was mind blown that they were giving us legitimately 50% more resources than we've ever been able to get in the past. But when you also make the cost of new cards 3 times more expensive than there had been in the past, that gets offset.
Yeah, but and to your point, like not all the card. Look, I don't think every card needs to be a home run. In fact, I think every card shouldn't be a home run. It's just too much. It's
Well,
too much.
it turns if every single card is a home run, then it ends up being power creep. So,
Right.
that is
Sure.
correct that everything continues being about 50% meta because then the other ones are niche and you end up playing them in very ridiculous 1C decks. But
Shout out to 1C, man. Like, speaking of people who need calls out, this game would be so boring if 1C wasn't out there going, yeah, but what if we play this card with it? It's like sometimes I go cross-eyed trying to look at his decks and figuring out what is going on. And then, like, I don't know. I'm super
what is he
appreciative
up
of
to?
his work.
For
Right?
sure. But
Right.
yeah, no, I mean, like, honestly, it would just be power creep if everything was too strong. So I do like the idea that 50% of them, or honestly less, 25% of them become like true meta cards. The other
Hmm.
ones are in certain good meta decks because of a particular combination. Um, but when you're making the cost on these things so unbelievably high, then even with the massive increase to the economy, it doesn't matter because the overall cost of the cards ends up being higher than the amount that you can get from the economy.
All right. We're gonna have to end it there. I think we're already at an hour and 15. Sabaku, I want to give you one last opportunity to give some thoughts, and then we're gonna go out. I had this idea that I wanted to pitch tonight that I think I'm gonna just punt. The idea was, what if Sheepyard randomly chose cards that are being overplayed to be capped at level 3 for the following month, just to sort of incentivize people to play other cards like recruits. Gifted recruits can only be level 3 this month. Play it if you want to, but good luck, kind of a thing. I think I'll drop that debate for tonight because we're an hour and plus in. So that ends the the main portion of this episode, which means it's time for me to remind you to contact us, preferably in our channel on the Stormbound Discord server or on Twitter at Brewed Sages. You can always email us at thebrewedsages@gmail.com. And that's going to do it for this episode. For Sabaiku, and Thomas. I am Freeloader. We are the Brewed Sages reminding you to stay hydrated.